Well, hey everyone, welcome to the Land in the Bible podcast. We are in episode 7 of the prophet series. How do you feel like it's going so far?
I like it.
I feel strong. I feel like it's gone well.
I love these stories.
So we're on...
Good blood and guts Old Testament.
Oh, yeah.
Murder and mayhem and warfare. It's good.
It is good.
It's real.
And we're on Elisha. And we were talking about him last episode. We've got a couple more with Elisha that we're going to get into. So kick me off. Where are we? What's the story? What's the situation? What's going on?
So basically where we left off, Elisha had accompanied the combined armies of Israel, Judah, and Edom in an attack against Moab. God worked a miracle and sent water to sustain the army. Also helped them defeat Moab. We didn't have time to go into all the details of how the rest of that battle played out, but they didn't quite finish the conquest of Moab. They kind of won, but didn't totally conquer. You know, I guess they won the battle, but they didn't necessarily win a war. And they kind of just all went home. So shortly after that is where we're picking up. So Elisha has now stepped fully on the stage. He's now done a big, giant miracle that, or at least you've been used by the Lord to work a miracle. And so now he's a known entity, and his ministry, his work is, in full bloom at this point. And it kind of goes like this. It says, when the king of Aram was waging war against Israel. So what happens is, in the aftermath of the previous war, the king of Aram, which again, that sort of Damascus is the capital. It's basically Syria. He decides, well, let's attack them. They just got finished with the war and might be a little tired, and we want to grow, and why not? Let's kind of feel this out. And he doesn't launch a big, giant, full invasion. He starts sort of incursions, sort of raiding parties and incursions, pushing a little, testing his boundaries. And this is how the Bible recounts it. It says, when the king of Aram was waging war against Israel, he conferred with his servants, my camp will be at such and such a place. But the man of God sent word to the king of Israel, be careful passing by this place, for the Arameans are going down there. Consequently, the king of Israel sent word to the place the man of God had told him about. The man of God repeatedly warned the king, so the king would be on his guard. So basically, the Arameans were trying to set up ambushes and attacks, and every time they would go to do something, they'd make a plan. God would tell Elisha. Elisha would tell the king, and Israel would be prepared for whatever the Arameans were doing, and the Arameans are getting frustrated. And so the king of Aram thinks, I've got a mole. Somebody's telling Elisha. And so he calls a meeting. And it says the king of Aram was enraged because of this matter. And he called the servants and demanded of them, tell me which one of us is for the king of Israel. He's like, somebody is talking, and I'm going to find out who, and I'm going to kill him. So who is it? And, I don't know if you guys have seen that, like the sort of Hitler rant video where Hitler was like, rah, 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 and all this.
And you just overdub it.
Yeah, whatever you want to. You put
subtitles.
You want. So I kind of imagine it's like that. The king of Aram is just like screaming and yelling, and all the servants are like, he kills people when he gets like this, and one of them has the courage to be like, and he says, no one, my lord, the king. Elisha, the prophet in Israel, tells the king of Israel even the words you speak in your bedroom. Like, God just tells him, and then there's nothing we can do, and nobody's telling, I promise. I didn't do it. And so you think, like, why would the king even believe that? Whatever, shall we kill you? But he doesn't. He believes it. So the king said, go and see where he is so I can send men to capture him. Okay, you got to think about this. How smart are you, king of Aram? So God tells him all your plans, and you're going to go get him. You don't think God's going to tell him your plan?
Yeah.
I mean, the whole point is God tells him all your plans. So it would seem that God's going to tell him this. Furthermore, if God is opposed to you, does capturing him even matter? Because can't God just tell somebody else your plan? Can't God, sort of foil your plans really any way he chooses? So if your enemy is really God, now you have a really big problem. And maybe the most logical path would be repent and ask God to like you, I don't know, or to be on your side.
Yeah.
So really none of this makes any sense. It's all really foolishly nonsensical when you think through it.
Yeah.
So, but whatever, he's an arrogant guy and he's mad. So that's his order. It says he says one of it. Okay. So the king said, go and see where he is and I'll send him to capture him. When he was told Elisha is in, we'll say Dothan, in Hebrew it's really Dothan. He sent horses, chariots, and a massive army there. They went by night and surrounded the city. Okay, so early on, it was just incursions and raids and everything. But now I guess he figures, well, he is the man of God. And if I just send, sort of the ancient equivalent of like a SEAL team or special forces to go snatch him, he'll be ready. So let's just send a big giant army because then it'll work out. I guess is his thinking. I don't know. It won't matter if he knows because I'm just going to, maybe. I don't know what he's thinking. But he sends this giant army to Dothan. Now, okay, so Dothan is in a valley. It's kind of where that Highland Ridge I always talk about begins to sort of taper out. And sort of, it's not quite at the Jezreel Valley yet, which is the end of all that, but it sort of flattens out there. And the city is a tell. Okay, a tell is a word. I don't think we've used that word much, if at all. So let me explain it now. What happened in the ancient world is that they did not have our capacity to move land and water like we can, even food for that matter. They can move food, but not like we can. But land and water, almost not at all. Okay, modern day, if we want to build a road, and there's a mountain in the way. Well, we can just blow the mountain up or cut a hole through it. It's not that big a deal to us, So we have dynamite and big trucks and whatever. We can do things they couldn't do. Regarding moving water, we have pipes and pumps, and the Romans. The Romans weren't going to come around for another 1,000 years after this. So we're a long way from the Romans yet. So the Romans were the first ones that could really move water at all. But even they didn't really have pumps. They used gravity to build their aqueducts. But these guys have really no capacity, or very little capacity to move water. I can't say no. They did a little bit, but not much. So when an ancient person looked around and they thought, we want to build a city, then they looked for these sort of magic 3 ingredients would tell them where to build a city. They had to have water. They had to have a road, particularly in Israel, because Israel is a really, really strange place. It's like we said in a previous episode, about the size of New Jersey, but with huge, huge elevation variations. You get up to about 10,000 feet and down to 1,300 feet below. So you got 11,000 feet of variation in elevation, which means if you go up high, it's cold. So you can grow cold weather crops in places like the Golan Heights, like apples and things like that. And if you go down low, then it's tropically hot. So in Jericho, you can grow, bananas and oranges and dates and things like that, which you can only grow in really hot places. And so if you've got a road that passes by your town, even if you're up the hill and you're growing oranges, growing apples, you can have bananas, dates, and oranges in your life because you trade your apples for their oranges, and everybody gets variety in their diet, and that improves and it's more than that because you can grow cows in some places, which means you can produce leather products, and you grow sheep better in other places, which means you're producing wool. And so like by having a road network that passes by, then you can trade goods. But since they couldn't move earth, the roads were what nature dictated. Okay. So you can't move the roads, you can't move the water. So whenever you find a well or a spring or a stream, that's good. If you find a wellspring or stream next to a natural road or path or easily traveled area, that's really good. And then the third ingredient is food. If everyone was working in agriculture, there was very, very few people back then were in the service industry or manufacturing. I mean, there were some people like Paul that made tents. See, that's even that's 1,000 years later. But for the most part, people did agriculture. They farmed or they shepherded. That was kind of what you did. So the next thing you looked for was arable land, where you can grow food to sustain a population. And if those three things magically all came together in one place, food, water, road, then definitely you put a city there. Mm-hmm. Okay. Most people believe that Jericho is the oldest continually inhabited city on earth. And the reason Jericho is the oldest continually inhabited city on earth is because it has all three of those ingredients in spades. It's down in the desert, so it's hot, but they have big giant springs, so there's lots of water, which you can then irrigate fields with and grow tropical fruit, again, oranges, bananas, dates, things like that. And what was a huge main trading thoroughfare coming up the Rift Valley out of Saudi Arabia up to Damascus and Syria, passed right by their front door. So you had it all. And therefore, it's like it called a city into being, the location of things. Humans passing by would be like, well, that's great. Let's build there. Dothan, likewise, had all the ingredients. Mm-hmm. And so you built there. Well, what happened in these places where people would build over and over, what happened, like Shiloh's an example of this. Bet Shean's an example of this. Those are good ones. Dothan, again, really good example of this. What happens in these places is someone builds. You go back 3,000-4,000 years, whatever. You can go back as far as you want to go. Somebody builds a city. This is great. We got all these things. We got food. We got water. We have trade. We're living a good lifestyle. Life's wonderful. And then there's an invasion or a fire or a plague. Something happens and wipes the place out. And so then the place sits. Maybe for 100, 200 years, it just sits empty. And the grasses grow and the trees grow. And they kind of eat up the buildings. And maybe the buildings collapse a little bit. Or collapse a lot, maybe if there was a big fire or earthquake or a war, and things are falling over and the trees are growing up through it. And it's not so great. And even to the point that you may not even be able to tell there used to be a city anymore. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of eaten up by nature and it's collapsed to the point of just being like a mound with trees.
Yeah.
Somebody else comes along and says, look, water, food, road, build a city. We're going to build it right there on that mound. Okay. You get in there, there's some rocks and stuff. We're like, well, just kind of let's level it out and build on top of it. Good idea. Build a city, and it's doing great. Then there's destruction, and then it falls. And you do this process over and over and over again on exactly the same site, and you end up with a big mound, like a big old hill. I'm talking, it looks like a little mountain almost, but it's not natural at all. What it is like a layer cake of civilizations that built and were destroyed. Somebody else came along and said, nice site, let's build. Built, destroyed, built, destroyed, built, destroyed. And so when you do archaeology, is you dig deeper into those columns, you're going down through history. Okay? Dothan, and the crazy thing is that when Joshua showed up in the country, 1400 BC, there were already tells. Mm-hmm. There had already been places where there had been several rounds of civilization that had come and gone. So Dothan's one of those. It's the middle of a plain. It's flat around it. But then that's surrounded by hills and mountains, which you mentioned in the story. But it's this sort of, again, a big mound, big hill, small mountain, whatever you want to call it, sitting in the middle of this plain, right? So the horses come in. They surround it. The army surrounds it, okay? Elisha and his guys wake up. This is what it says. They came by night and surrounded it to get Elisha. When the servant of the man of God got up early and went out, he discovered an army with horses and chariots surrounding the city. Sometimes the Bible just gives us sentences and it doesn't give us tone, so you have to do a little bit of reading in to get the full drama of what's going on. But this guy's scared. He says, Master, what are we to do? Oh no, they're here to get us. We're going to die. Elisha is not even marginally worried. He's like, oh yeah, whatever. He says, don't be afraid. for those who are with us outnumber those who are with them. And he's looking out the window and he's like, I don't see anybody else. What are you talking about? And Elisha prays, says, Lord, please open his eyes and let him see. So the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he saw the mountain was covered with horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. And so the servant looked, this miracle takes place where Elisha prays that the servant will get a glimpse at the spiritual reality, which is more important and more real than the physical reality. Again, we talked about this in the previous episode, but we are so constantly seduced by the physical world that we see, and that things that we can hit and touch and taste and feel, and it's great. And I love the physical. There's nothing wrong with the physical world. We're not Gnostics. We don't believe physical things are inherently evil. We're not Platonists. As Christians, we believe God made the world and it was great and good, and he said it was very, very good at the end of creation. So we don't hate the physical world, but we should be aware of the fact that there is a spiritual world that existed before, will exist after maybe, and certainly is more real and more important. I think that's just clear. And so this guy gets a glimpse into that, and it rocks his world, because he sees these angelic beings like horses and chariots of fire all on those soldiers are down here, but they're all surrounded too. And so he's like, oh, okay. And then it just goes on to say, when the Arameans came against Elisha, Elisha prayed to the Lord, please strike the nation with blindness. So he struck them with blindness. And I don't want to go into all the story. I just want to, they weren't like really blind, like they couldn't see. It's like he gave them this like mental fog where they're like, oh, where are we? And Elisha said, you're in the wrong place. Let's go over here. And he took them to Samaria, where they could have been captured or killed. And at some point they kind of wake up and they're like, what? How did we get here? And, so there's this sort of miracle that's worked, and Elisha is saved. And I read that and I think, wow, that's awesome. It would be so cool to be in, that kind of distress, to be in a moment where there's life and death, there's something really important, and to pray and for God to just, bam, come through, and here's the miracle, here's the answer, here's the thing, and it's done, and it's so wonderful, and it's so great, and I'm so glad we're alive, and God loves me, and all this happened, and yay, woo, that'd be fun. But that's not always reality. As a matter of fact, I want to say it's very rarely reality. And I love the fact that the Bible is honest with us. And so what I want to do today is, I know this is the prophets, and I know we're keying on Elijah and Elisha, but I want to take time and really spend more time on a different story, because there's another story that took place also in Dothan that didn't go this way. Okay? So in the whole Bible, Dothan gets two mentions. It gets two stories, and the two stories go something like this. The first story in the Bible that takes place in Dothan actually takes place in Genesis chapter 37. And for those of you who don't know, Genesis 37 is the story of Joseph. And the background of the story of Joseph that you have to know, or it's the beginning. The story of Joseph is very long in the Bible. It goes from 37 to 50. It's 13 chapter story minus one. There's a one kind of weird. There's 12 of those 13 chapters of the Joseph story, which means he gets more text than. There are very few Bible characters that get more text than that. He's in a top 10 or so for sure. Joseph's a big deal character in the Bible, and we may do a whole series on Joseph at some point, really break it down. Let's do it. But we should get to the core of it in this. And the first thing that you have to know is that Joseph had a really, really horrible father who really loved him, but not so much as other kids. So Joseph's family, Jacob's the dad, it was the absolute trailer trash, dumpster fire. Like, it was just awful, So the dad is married to two sisters, Rachel and Leah. He loves Rachel. He doesn't love Leah. both of the girls are in competition with each other, and they decide that the way to win favor with their husband is to give him other women. And so both of them present him a gift of a slave girl. So he's also got, Bilhah and Zilpah or something like that. I think I got the second one wrong, but he's got these other ladies on the side. So Jacob is making babies with 4 different women. Later on, one of his sons will get with one of the mistresses, so it's just nuts.
Yeah.
Okay. And
you've got the stolen birthrights. You've got all the stuff that's happening.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of interesting because his daddy, Isaac, they were a little more stable. That was one man and one woman for life. And they, it was a little more stable. I mean, mom obviously had a favorite son and there were some issues there, but
Jacob, even coming like from how
how he even got to there was by stealing and manipulating and absolutely. Yeah. And then his uncle plays him just as much and dumps the daughter. Jacob never wanted Leah. So she's like the one that got dumped on him. He didn't even want her. So and as the story plays out, what happens is that maybe unfortunately, maybe fortunately, I mean, it's what God wanted. The unwanted wife was the one who had all the babies. And Rachel, the loved one, only had 2. So she only gave Jacob 2 of his 12 sons. And all of Leah's sons knew Dad doesn't like our mom. Dad likes her. Dad treats our mom like garbage. I mean, he'll drop by the tent and get her pregnant periodically, but mostly he just makes her work, and he fawns on Rachel over there, and she thinks she's the princess. And, and then when Rachel finally does have a child, Joseph, well, all of a sudden he's the youngest and catapults to first place. He's the favorite. So Dad hates our mom. He doesn't care about us. He loves her. You got to think that because the girls are in open rivalry. I mean, that's clear in the Bible. They make not very nice comments to one another, and they say there's some weird stuff in there where there's where like one of them's hungry and he's can I have some soup, and like, what, you have my man now, you want my soup, and well, you could have him tonight if I can get some, and you're like, what are they doing, so it's just like crazy stuff in there, and you're like, wow. And so that these kids grew up hearing all that. Mm-hmm. They grew up hearing their mama complain about how she was treated, and probably her version of how horrible her sister was, and then vice versa, and back and forth. And there's just this, I mean, there is a reason why there is a clear biblical ideal of one man and one woman. Like, it just doesn't work. People will sometimes say, well, the Bible says you could have like, no, it doesn't. Every single time the Bible ever depicts a multiple marriage situation, it is a nightmare. Yeah. So like, even if it doesn't say don't do this, now later the New Testament says you can't be like a leader in the church unless you're a man of one woman. So if you have multiples, like, it doesn't say you can't, it just says you can't be a leader in the church, some people are like, oh, this is never forbidden. Like, no, but there is a clear ideal communicated, and every time that ideal is broken, it's a disaster. So I think it does actually, but it's a train wreck of a family. And the boys are literally murderously envious and hatred of Joseph, or, full of hatred of Joseph. They can't stand him. And Daddy makes it worse because their dad has no problem saying, yeah, your mom's great, but I love her. You boys are awesome. That's the good one. Mm-hmm. No problem. And he treats them differently. Joseph gets famously the coat of many colors. Some things will say it was a long sleeve, because you get different translations on exactly what it was. But it's an expensive, clothes were hard to make back then. You didn't just go to, whatever H&M or, Old Navy or whatever place you like to get, Costco, Target, whatever you go. You didn't go and buy a shirt for $15 back then, Yeah. You painstakingly made something, and depending on the color of the dye or the quality of the wool, I mean, it could be almost like buying a car now. It was a lot of effort and money because you had to shear the sheep and spin the wool and weave the fabric and cut. I mean, it was a mess. It took forever to make clothes. So to give, Joseph this very, very nice, expensive garment was very indulgent, and that wasn't a sin. The sin was that he didn't do the same thing for the other boys. His other boys didn't feel loved. And then that breeds murderous hatred in their heart. So you have a train wreck family, people full of hatred, envy, lust, all kinds of crazy stuff going on. And that's the backdrop. Okay? That's the backdrop, and that's what God has to work with. And what makes it even harder is the fact that God made a promise back in Genesis when they sinned, when he talked about you'll crush his head, he'll bruise your heel. There's a promise made there that God's going to fix it. You just wrecked the world. You just wrecked the world with sin. But we're going to fix it. And to do that, there had to have a seed that came from the woman that eventually resulted in the restoration, in the fixing, in the setting right of the world. And that seed has to come through a certain line, right? And we see that throughout all the Old Testament. We see that Adam and Eve have two kids, and one of them's bad and one of them's good. You got the sort of the holy seed, and then the bad one kills the good one. So God then brings up another one, Seth, and he's the good one. And then you roll the clock forward, and most people on earth are horrible, but Noah is still good. That route, that seed that's going to fix it, that has to come from Eve and get to Jesus eventually. That route is going to come through here, and you get Noah, and then he has a bunch of sons. Well, who's the good one? Shem's the good one. That's where the blessing is going to come from, and from him we get to Abraham, and God says, you're going to have a son and your seed's going to bless the world. So that's where it's coming from. And then, then he has two boys. Who's the good one? Isaac, and then Isaac has two sons, Jacob and Esau. Who's the good? Who's the bad one? Esau's just worldly minded. Jacob is the one, despite all his problems, that is oriented towards God. That's the good one. And then Jacob has a truck ton of sons. So out of this dumpster fire of horrible humans is supposed to come the seed of God and something good, and it's got to, and something holy and good and righteous has to get transmitted through this family, and it's a mess. And so God has a plan of how to save their lives and make them the kind of people they're supposed to be. And so what happens is that hatred has grown, and because of the division in the family, because these boys aren't so loved, and this one is, Joseph says, hey guys, go tend the sheep. Hey Joseph, hang with me. And the boys take the sheep, and back then people went a long way to take the sheep grazing, and so they were off miles and miles from home. And they're off, and at some point Jacob's like, well, yeah, probably we should check on the sheep, check on the boys. And he says, you know what? Why don't you go? And you got to know the whole background too, right? That by this point, Joseph's already had two dreams where he dreamed that his brothers and even father and mother would bow to him, and the brothers that already hate him were like, "Nah, ain't happening. We're going to kill you," And so there's all that angst is built up, and so now you've got the coat, you've had your dumb dreams. Dad makes us work while you sit at home, and they just have had enough, and they're out in the field, and Dad says, go check on him. And Joseph says, okay, Dad. And it says, then Israel said to him, so that's Joseph, go and see how your brother's flocks are doing and bring word back to me. So he sent him from Hebron, from the Hebron Valley, he went to Shechem. So he's going north along that ridge line we keep talking about in almost every episode lately. And he says, a man found him there wandering in the fields and asked him, he's gone 40, 50 miles. Like this old, he took a long walk, took him a few days, just wandering around looking for some sheep in the field, some sheep, I should say. He said, I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they're pasturing their flocks? The guy replies, he says, they've moved on from here. I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. So Joseph set out after his brothers and found them at Dothan. So now we're about to have the second story in the history of the Bible that takes place in Dothan. The first story, which actually takes place later, God saved Elisha with chariots of fire and angelic beings and all this crazy stuff. This one, here's how it goes. They saw him in the distance, and before he had reached them, they plotted to kill him. They said to one another, oh, look, here comes the dream expert. So now come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of the pits. We can say a vicious animal ate him, then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. So get that. They see him coming. And by the way, this all works geographically because of the way the city is up on that hill like I described, and it's like really steep, and it's a big, long, open valley. So you really could see somebody 2, 3, 4 miles out. So you'd have 30, 45 minutes to talk about him as they're approaching. And if he's got this bright color coat, they can really tell him. It makes sense in the context of the story.
Yeah.
So they're talking about him in his stupid dreams. You know, let's kill him, you know. Reuben, he's the only one that's trying to be a little bit good, heard this. He tried to save him from them. He said, let's not take his life. He said, don't shed blood. Throw him into this pit in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. So Reuben was going to try to rescue him. When Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped off Joseph's robe, the long sleeve robe that he had on, and took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty without water. And they sat down to eat a meal. And when they looked up, there was a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were carrying aromatic gum, balsam, and resin going down to Egypt. So they're going to kill him. Reuben says, let's not kill him. And they're like, well, let's just throw him in a pit while we think about it. So you got to imagine, you got to imagine from Joseph's perspective. You're serving your dad. Your brothers are always awful to you. They all hate you. But you know they're going to kill you. You get there like, hey guys, how are things going? And they beat you, rip your clothes off, and throw you in a pit. You got to be scared at that point. But probably at that point you think like, well, they're just messing around. They're not going to do this. And you can almost imagine him being like, come on guys, let me out of here. Guys, come on. What are we doing? Mm-hmm. Dude, come on, guys, come on. You know, you can almost imagine he's begging, he's pleading, he's in this pit. He's like, let me out of here. And they're just having lunch while he cries, begs, screams in a pit. And it says they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites. We already read that. And Judah said to his brothers, what do we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come on, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay a hand on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. So here's Judah. I mentioned earlier, you know, the seed, the good one. Judah's the good one. Ugh. You know, and then you read the next chapter, which we don't have time for today, Judah and Tamar, and you're like, is Judah really the good one? But let's see how things shape up.
Yeah.
So, but at least he's not murderous. You know, he's like, well, let's not kill him. Let's just sell him as a slave. He is our own flesh. You know, he is our brother. I mean, could you imagine talking about your brother and being like, well, I don't want to kill him. I just want to sell him. You know? Okay. So, he said his brothers agreed. When the Midianite traders passed by, his brothers pulled Joseph out of the pit and sold him for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took Joseph to Egypt. I can't imagine, actually. I want to say I can only imagine, but the truth is I can't imagine what that felt like. I can't imagine what it felt like to have your brothers, who are supposed to love you, beat you, take your clothes, throw you in a pit. At some point you think, well, they're mad, but they must just be messing around. They're not going to go through with this. And then you hear them bartering for you, trying to sell you. At some point, I have to think that Joseph, like a switch had to flip. Like at some point, he had to press his panic button. You know, at some point, he had to just start begging and screaming and praying. And back to our previous story, Elisha didn't panic at all. He was like, God's got this. We're fine. Look at the angels. Where were the angels? Why didn't, that was against a whole army, 70, 100,000 people. This is just like 12 dudes. Why didn't God save him? I think the answer is clear that God was working towards a greater purpose that took longer to do. Mm-hmm. Saving Elisha from that army was a pretty quick, easy fix. Fixing the murderous hearts of a family, saving their lives from an upcoming famine, helping Judah, who eventually is the seed of the promise, come through him, turn into not horrible. These things are processes. And I think in our lives, what we have to be aware of is the fact that sometimes God works through a miracle and sometimes he works through a process. Mm-hmm. And he's working nonetheless, either way. And so what happens if you follow the Joseph story is you see that it works out. And obviously we don't have time to go through the whole thing. He's sold. Initially he goes to a place called Potiphar where he's a slave. He's doing well there, and then he gets accused of rape, which he didn't do, and then he gets put in jail, and he actually kind of does well there, and he says, I'm kind of running the prison, and then there's another pair of dreams that he has. There's 3 pairs of dreams in the story, right? The first one where he says, I want to be your boss, and the family's like, we're going to kill you for that. And then there's the dreams in prison where the prisoners have the dreams, and he tells the one guy, you're going to get your job back. Another guy, you're going to get killed. Sorry. And it happens, the one guy, the next day, they let him out and he gets his job back. He's the cupbearer for the king, which means he's highly trusted because, he's sampling the food before passing it on to the king, and he could slip some poison and kill the king. It's a highly trusted position. This guy gets his job back. Other guy. And the guy that got his job back was supposed to tell the king to let Joseph out, but somehow he gets his job back and he just forgets for 2 years. Sometimes people forget stuff, right? And you stay in jail for 2 more years because they forgot. Kind of what happens. Then the king has a couple of dreams. The king dreams about skinny cows and fat cows and all this kind of stuff. And he's like, I don't know what all this means, but I think it's from God. And at that point, the cupbearer is like, oh, Joseph, I know a guy. And Pharaoh's like, where is he? He's like, he's in jail. And I don't have time to go into all the details of it, but I think it is crystal clear from the story that Potiphar knew Joseph didn't rape his wife. If Potiphar believed Joseph raped his wife, he'd have killed Joseph. I think Potiphar put Joseph in jail because he didn't want to admit to the whole world that his wife was lecherous or whatever. So he needed to defend his family's honor and be like, Joseph's bad, but he didn't have the heart to kill him. So I think Joseph, even though he's been in jail, has a good reputation. Mm-hmm. And Potiphar was super high ranking. So probably even Pharaoh has heard about him a little bit. So they're like, Joseph knows. Where's Joseph? In jail. Oh yeah, because Potiphar had to cover his, whatever. So, okay, go get Joseph. And they bring him in. Joseph interprets the dreams and gives a solution. So there's going to be 7 years of feast, 7 years of famine. During the years of feast, we got to bank food against the next years so that we'll be able to feed the people and have seed at the end of it all. So, okay, let's do that. And Joseph's like, I know how to do it. We could, so Joseph has the plans. The king says, you're going to be the man. We're going to let you do it. So he goes in a day from the prison to, well, let's read what happens. The proposal pleased Pharaoh and all his servants. This is in Genesis 41. And he said to them, can we find anyone like this? A man who has God's spirit in him. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there was no one as discerning and wise as you are. You will be over my house, and all my people will obey your commands. Only I as king will be greater than you. Pharaoh also said to Joseph, see, I am placing you over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh removed his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, clothed him with fine linen garments, and placed a gold chain around his neck. He had Joseph ride in his second chariot, and servants called out before him, make way. So he placed him over all the land of Egypt. And he said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and no one will be able to raise a hand or foot in all of Egypt without your permission. And so Joseph is now the boss. Some people say, well, Joseph at that point was the second most powerful man in Egypt. And that's technically true because the Pharaoh could be like, you're out of a job. But really, when it came to the daily operation of the country, he was the most powerful man in Egypt because Pharaoh, what he did was Pharaoh said, Joseph, you're really smart. You do my job. I'm going to the house.
Yeah.
And all he did all day was sit around on his yacht, and get fanned and fed grapes and chilled out while Joseph actually ran the country.
Mm-hmm.
So Joseph, in some ways, is really the most powerful man in Egypt. Okay? Wow. Big stuff. And often we read the story and we're like, wow, Joseph, everything's great now. He's the top. But I don't think Joseph ever quite viewed it that way. And I think we can see that he didn't view it that way because of some evidence in the story. And if you see what happened, it says that next thing it says, and this is in 41-45, it says Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zaphanath-Paneah. No one ever calls Joseph Zaphanath-Paneah. You've never heard of the story of Zaphanath-Paneah, I don't think, which is interesting because we always call Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We don't call them Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah,
right?
And their Jewish names have really good meanings, and their Babylonian names have horrible meanings, but somehow we just go ahead and call them by their really almost curse level Babylonian names, not their really good Jewish names. And in here, it's sort of similar. It does seem that this name means something on lines of like God sees and lives or something like that, but it's still Egyptian. It's not Hebrew, So it just wasn't quite what Joseph wanted. You remember Joseph's dream. Joseph's dream way back when wasn't that the nation of Egypt will bow to me. It's that his brothers and daddy would. That's weird, but he never wanted to be gone. I think to the very end, Joseph, and there's proof of that in the text, that even though he was elevated to great heights in Egypt, it's just not where he wanted to be. And you can see it this way. So it says, just after that, down in verse 50, it says 2 sons were born to Joseph. So Joseph takes a wife, by the way. She's an Egyptian woman. It says 2 sons were born to Joseph before the years of the famine. Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, bore them to him. Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh. And if you read it, this text defines Manasseh. He says he named him Manasseh and said, God has made me forget all my hardship. And this translation, I actually don't love it. It says, in my whole family. I prefer, a lot of translations will say, all of my hardships in my father's household. And my father's household. I don't think he forgot his whole family. I think what Joseph is saying here is, I've gotten over what they did to me. I let all that stuff go. And, I think in an earlier episode, we talked about how until you've been through something, you can't really fully minister or understand.
Right.
And I don't think very many people listening to this podcast will have suffered to the extent that Joseph suffered. I mean, there may be some out there. There's still a lot of horrible evil in this world, and there are still people taken as slaves, and there are still people that are horribly abused. I had a situation years ago where I had a conflict in the church I was pastoring, and I was trying to mediate with these 2 women, and I was talking to one of them and frankly scolding her a little bit. And I said to her, have you suffered as much as Jesus? And she looked at me dead serious and said, yes. And then she went on to tell me why. And when she got through explaining, I thought, probably not as much as Jesus, but that's pretty bad. Yeah. It was bad. And so there is a reality. There are people out there, it may not be you, but it may be you, that have suffered horrifically. But what I can tell you, and with this woman in particular, she was very damaged by what she'd been through, and she ended up leaving our congregation. And we kind of didn't have the resources to help her because she had really been through hell. And I bumped into her a couple of years later, and she came up to me, she gave me a hug, and she's like, I want to apologize to you. I was like, why? She was like, for how I acted back then. And I was like, it's okay. And she said, well, God had to do something in me before he did something with me. And so she had gone through a real healing process regarding like her past. And again, she had been through absolutely awful, awful things. And you look at Joseph and him naming his son, I've forgotten about hardship, my father's household. And what he's saying is, I let it go. Like I've let that go. Because you had to think that there were thousands of nights when Joseph lay in his bed and thought, how could they beat me? How could they throw me in that pit? How could they sell me? Those were my brothers. It wasn't my fault Dad preferred me. It wasn't my fault Dad preferred my mom. I didn't do anything wrong. Like he had to just like replay those moments over and over again. He had to think through every word that was said. He had to think through how he cried and screamed and begged and they didn't care. He had to think about the moment they tied his hands up and he became a slave and his brothers took money for him. Like he had to just, I can't imagine. Like I've been hurt in life, lied about, and mistreated, not close to this level. And months, you think about it, replay it. What he'd been through, And if Joseph is a model to us, and I think he is, like what he's saying is at some point you have to get to a place where you just let it go, where you, like Joseph, can say, God, help me forget about it. God, I've let those things go. With God's help, just let it go. I'm not going to think about it anymore and dwell anymore. I'm ready to move on. And then if you don't believe that Joseph never wanted to be in Egypt and he didn't care that he was, exalted. He was exalted. He was the boss. He was great in Egypt. But if you don't believe that he never wanted to be there, listen to what he named his second son. And the second son he named Ephraim and said, God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. He's the prime minister. He's the vizier. He's the boss. He's the richest guy other than the king himself. He has all of the food and money and women and clothes and chariots and horses. He has everything he wants. And he looks at it and he says, this is the land of my affliction. Now, it's funny because, he was afflicted in Egypt. He got accused of rape and put in jail and all. But he kind of got afflicted more in Israel, didn't he? His brothers were never nice to him. They beat him half to death, threw him in a pit, and sold him as a slave. But he doesn't refer to that as his land of affliction. He says, God brought me here. I never wanted to be here. But he made me fruitful here. And then, so that's how Joseph is processing all this. He sees the hand of God. God made me fruitful here. He sees the hand of God, what's happened in his soul and his spirit. Like, God's helped me to forget and to move on and to be healed from those hurts. But, it's not as he wants him to be. And then something crazy happens. And what happens is his brothers finally show up. So, even regarding that, it's kind of crazy, right? Like his brothers, all the years after, they never thought like, maybe we should go find Joseph. Maybe, was there never enough regret? It's clear the brothers always thought about it. Because when they start having troubles, they don't know it's Joseph yet. When they come down to visit, he starts kind of messing with them. They're like, this is God because of what we did. It's been 15, 20 years. And they're still, that there's just been like a deep level of conviction and guilt and shame. And we have to hide this from our dad. And like, they just lingered in that family. What eventually happens is, and there's no time to go into all the details of it, but the brothers show up and Joseph decides he's going to test them, right? So the test kind of goes something like this. The first thing he does is he's going to see if they'll still be horrible to each other. And he's like, leave one behind and go. And are you going to be willing to leave one behind? And the only way you can get this one back is to go bring the other one and bring him here. And that's the second test, because he wants to see if his younger brother, Benjamin, is still alive. Because he wants to know, do they still hate my mother? Do they still hate my wing of the family? Did they kill him too? So he wants to see if Benjamin's still alive. And do they care enough about each other now to protect each other? And they do. They go get Benjamin and they bring him back. So now he knows his brother's still alive, his full brother. And he knows that they're doing better. And the last test is, let's see if they'll sacrifice Benjamin. And he sort of sets this thing up where he fakes it like Benjamin stole something. So Benjamin's going to go to jail. And here's where something really, really cool happens. So Joseph, who has not revealed himself yet, takes Benjamin and he says, I'm going to keep him and put him in jail and make him a slave. You people go home. And Judah, the one who sold Joseph, comes to Joseph and says, take me instead. He says, please, my father's already lost a son. If he loses this one, he'll die. Take me and let this one go free. And in that, you see that he's changed. Nobody ever said, Jacob probably went to his death loving Rachel more. That hasn't changed. Mm-hmm. But now Judah is willing to die himself to free the brother that his father loves. And in that, you see that Judah has become the seed, what he's supposed to be, to carry on that lineage towards Christ. So he's changed. The family has changed. And at that point, Joseph just can't take it anymore. So it says in chapter 45, he couldn't keep his composure. So he's just like, get out of here. He runs everybody out of the room except for the 12 brothers. And he just starts bawling. He says he's wailing, like crying so loud that everyone in the palace heard, but they're like, what is going on? And he finally reveals himself. And of course the brothers think, and he's going to kill us. Because that would be normal. It would be normal to be like, suckers, you sent me down here. You said you were never going to bow to me. You're going to bow now, aren't you? That would be so normal. But God's been at work in Joseph, and he's forgotten it. Doesn't mean he actually forgot. It just means that he's chosen to let it go, with God's help. And so he's let it go. And so he hugs them all, and so let's read a little bit of it. It starts in verse 4 of chapter 45. It says, then Joseph said to his brothers, please come near to me. And they came near. I am Joseph, your brother, he said, the one you sold into Egypt. And now don't be grieved or angry with yourself for selling me here, because God sent me here ahead of you to preserve life. For the famine has been in these land for 2 years, and there'll be 5 more years without plowing and harvesting. God sent me ahead of you to establish you as a remnant within the land and to keep you alive by a great deliverance. Therefore, it is not you that sent me here, but God. So he's like, it's okay. You see down in verse 14, it says, then Joseph threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept. And Benjamin wept on his shoulder, and Joseph kissed each of his brothers as he wept. And then he talks to them, and you see this family, and they used to hate each other. And now they're crying and they're weeping and they're talking, and Joseph's better and Judah's better. And God has worked a very, very long-term miracle. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so, and just to close out the point about, where did Joseph want to be? If you read, you skip all the way ahead to chapter 50 in Genesis. If you skip all the way to chapter 50, it's interesting because the last text. Well, it's the last chapter of the book of Genesis, but the last words of the book of Genesis that are spoken, the last recorded speech, anything in a quote mark in Genesis is Joseph speaking just prior to his own death, and he says, "When God comes," so he predicts the slavery. You're going to be slaves here. It's going to be bad. He says this: "When God comes to your aid, You are to carry my bones up from here. So get that. At his death, he's like, don't even leave my bones here. I want to go home. Okay? He always wanted to go home. But God had a use for him somewhere else, which I think is cool. But you see what God was doing. He heals the family. He prepares Judah to be who he's supposed to be. He heals Joseph, and it's a long-term process through which God is working. So to go way, way back to Elisha and do this comparison, sometimes God can save you and work a miracle real quick right now. And sometimes God works through long, painful, suffering processes to bring about something better at the end. And that's the sort of, if you would, the moral of the story, of the comparison, is when you pray, you might get this chariots of fire. You might get Joseph in the pit where God seems to not listen. But don't lose your heart. Don't lose your faithfulness that God is working. It's just that working things out in the human heart is not a snap thing like a physical salvation is. So anyway, I love to pair those stories because that's the only two stories that happen in that place. And it's such a stark difference in how God works, but he's clearly working in both.
Yeah.
So
that was good. We're giving all the extra premium content. We're going long, but we're giving good stuff.
I'll try to shorten up the next one.
No, I think that's great. I mean, I think it's super applicable for us today.
That's what we go for.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like the chariots and the angel army there is less common. Obviously that's less common, but I'm saying the immediate answers to prayer, other than like when you lose your keys and you can't find your keys, those prayers happen all the time. But the like the awful situation and you get like the immediate thing, it seems like those are. It's
really fun when that happens.
It's fun, but it's not common, and it's not. I mean,
it's probably reflective of the heart of God. God probably cares more about your character, your heart, what's going on in your family dynamics. I mean, like you read anything that's said about Judah before he offers himself for Benjamin, he's pretty awful.
Right.
Like he's a pretty awful man.
Mm-hmm.
He's violent. He's selling Joseph. He's sleeping with prostitutes. He's just crazy stuff. And then all of a sudden, a few years have passed and he's processed through some things and God's obviously working him and he's better.
I mean, he probably felt awful eventually about what happened, what he did to Joseph and how it destroyed his dad. And he's like carrying that around for a long time. That'll change you, Yeah,
for sure. And he lost a couple of sons along the way. Like, he'd gone on a rough path himself.
Yeah.
So,
well, those longer, the older you get and the more you're able to look back on situations and go, oh, I see why that happened now. Then that takes time though.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to be on the front end of that and be like, I know this is hard, but God's got a plan. I mean, it's really hard to think that in the moment.
When you're in jail for raping somebody that you didn't rape,
right?
Like Joseph, to hold on to like God's got a plan. You want to do what Job's wife said, curse God and die. You just want to be like, out, but that's not a good route. You don't want to go that way either.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, this was good. So,
last Elisha's coming up. We're going to have the siege at Samaria. God's going to work a miracle, and we'll try to stay under an hour.
Perfect.
All right.
Well, as always, check us out, thelandinthebible.com for more content. Like and subscribe, and check us out on the podcast wherever you can listen to such things. And we'll see you later.
Hey guys, if you like our content, please click like and subscribe. That really helps us out a lot. And then also go to thelandinthebible.com and subscribe for premium content. If you go over there, we've got tons of stuff that's really great. We have print materials that you can download. We have PDF study guides for all of our lessons. We've got devotional materials over there. We also have every single video and podcast we've done in full-length format with no ad interruptions and full video. So you can get all of that on thelandofthebible.com with the premium subscription, and that really helps us. It helps us generate more content, and also half of it goes to help us go overseas and help refugee kids, is what we're really called to do.